President Sam Lotu-Iiga.
O te whaatulau atu I le paia o le whono whaitu la whono. Le Parliamentary o le malo o New Zealand. Le whio o le whionga le Parliamentary. Le malu le kapaneta. Le whio o whionga le whonga whetalai. Le paia tele o suius whono mai malo ese. Le Pasifika ai tainane. Le paia mawalunga le suius whono le Parliamentary o Aotearoa New Zealand. Tulau lava. O le a tautala I le ngangana e whaasino ai le nei aso. Sir, I've greeted you in my native tongue of Samoan. And I greet members of this House, members of the Cabinet, of course, Prime Minister, and I want to especially welcome the delegates to the Pacific Parliamentary Forum. Delegates, I want to thank you personally for venturing here for a week from your valuable family time, your work commitments and other duties and obligations. And it's an honour, sir, to speak in this debate, first as a Pacific person representing the many Pacific people in this Parliament and across this country, as well as the fine people of Maunga Kia in Auckland. Secondly, as a Pacific person born in Samoa, whose family came here seeking a better life. And like many of you in the gallery, we came as migrants here many years ago, and my parents wanted a better life for my siblings and I, a better education, well-paying jobs, to ultimately serve our families and our communities. Finally, sir, I'm honoured to be a member of this John Key-led national government. And we're committed to the plight of Pacific people, not just here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but also to our Pacific brothers and sisters who are scattered across the many Pacific islands across the Pacific Ocean. I, like my colleagues, would like to thank the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Committee in bringing about this forum. This forum is a consequence of their report to Parliament in 2010. And I commend the leadership of John Hayes and the recommendation to foster better relationships with parliamentarians across the Pacific. And this was something that was shared to me by my experiences when I visited the Pacific on the many Pacific missions that we go on as parliamentarians here in New Zealand. Sir, I think it's significant that New Zealand is hosting this forum, and it demonstrates New Zealand's leading role in the Pacific, in which we punch well above our weight in terms of contribution that we make to our Pacific nations. To that end, we've heard how we spend over $250 million annually in the aid to the Pacific. Of course, that's more than half of our aid budget. And I'd like to thank the Minister, who isn't here, the Honourable Murray McCully, because he steadfastly increased our commitment of these resources so that we may improve the plight of Pacific people in the Pacific. Of course, this aid includes $145 million in funding towards a joint venture with Australia, and that will provide over 500,000 children with education across the Pacific. We've heard domestically that we are assisting Pacific workers with recognised regional seasonal employer scheme. And this, sir, provides $25 million in take-home pay, much of which is returned to the Pacific. Indeed, only last month, and we've heard that we hosted in Auckland the Pacific Energy Summit, where we managed to secure donor commitments of $635 million. So these funds are to advance renewable energy projects and energy efficiency plans. And so all these projects don't even go towards some of the other areas that have been mentioned already, and they include New Zealand aid projects which focus on non-communicable diseases, sexual and reproductive health, as well as strengthening national health systems, which we'll be hearing about later in our forum. Of course, relationships are not just about aid funding, sir. We are here to build on relationships, foster cooperation and promote political cohesion across our Pacific boundaries. And we'll be discussing issues such as health, climate change and gender issues. However, there is little time and much to discuss So my hope is that other items may find themselves on the agenda during the breaks, during the rugby, during the barbecue tonight at Premier House. And some of these subjects include education, economic development, infrastructure and employment matters. See, I believe that these matters are interconnected and that education still remains, we have the Education Minister with us today, it remains the key to unlocking the potential of our Pacific peoples, both here in New Zealand and across the Pacific. So these are some of the issues that I've been pushing for Pacific people in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Therefore, these are the issues I am interested in hearing from you, our delegates, and I know how much we have to learn from your experiences in the Pacific, your unique Pacific knowledge and wisdom, and how we can apply those experiences to Aotearoa, New Zealand. Sir, I know that sustainable economic development cannot happen in an environment where basic education is weak. So I would hope that discussions include how we can assist in building models for infrastructure and education. What are effective ways of providing education services and developing a modern workforce to sustain those higher standards in the Pacific? What is the role of the internet in leveraging the learning of kids in the Pacific? As you can see, delegates, I have more questions than answers for you, but I'm certainly here to listen and learn from your experiences in the Pacific. I'd like to use a local example of a project called Manaia Kalani, and this project has assisted young Pacific and Māori children through wireless networks and affordable netbooks. And I know those types of learning models are possible. In fact, they're probably happening in the Pacific, and I'd like to hear from you delegates during the weekend on this. In terms of infrastructure, apart from the constraints around funding, which we all debate and we all disagree upon across this House, but how are projects delivered such that it is sensitive to Pacific cultural values, our traditions, our norms, while creating opportunities for employment and wealth creation? Those are some of the things that we grapple with here, and I'd like to hear from you delegates as to how you deal with them in your nations. May I say that we need to hear your voices in this engagement so that we may better understand how we can engage with you, our Pacific neighbours, how we can improve the lives of your people as you can do for the lives of our people here in New Zealand. And when we consider issues of economic development, we also need to assess issues of trade. And the Pacific, of course, has offered much in the way of trade to New Zealand. We have nearly $1 billion annually, and it's New Zealand's 7th largest export market and our 20th largest trading market. Now, herein lies the interesting issue, because, sir, while we benefit greatly from exports to the Pacific, the surplus does not necessarily benefit our Pacific neighbours. And while we all accept that volume of trade is important because it raises all our standards of living, we only know too well that extremely large balance of trade deficits can be crippling to countries, leading to high levels of government debt and or the sale of domestic assets. That's something for you to ponder this weekend, and I again urge you to give us some feedback on that. So the question is, how can we foster domestic industries that lead to greater exports, not just to New Zealand, but more global markets? And to that end, I've raised in Select Committee financial reviews here in New Zealand how we can assist you with those markets. What can New Zealand Trade and Enterprise do to assist in those markets with introductions to buyers of your goods and services? And for the delegates, please assist us in how we can address what I believe is a precarious anomaly. But trade is about relationships in foreign lands and can prove expensive, distant and out of reach for Pacific traders. And again, delegates, I challenge you that intra-Pacific trade between your countries as well as between New Zealand and your countries is particularly important. And I also urge you to think about markets of value which many of your nations have strong links to. For example, the United States, Australia, and of course of late China. Sir, we've also have the Pacific Cooperation Foundation in New Zealand, which is a public-private organisation which leverages a lot of those promotions to trade. And finally, sir, may I commend to you the work of the annual Pacific Island Forum, which brings together leaders from 15 Pacific nations. Sir, this forum, I believe, complements that work, and I look forward to working with you in this forum to supporting our already strong relationships between our nations. Thank you, sir.
This is a split call, 5 minutes. Chris Farfui.
Yes, and I'll be sharing that with my Fijian brother, Rajan Prasad.